Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And today I have the one and the only Mr. Larry Roberts on the show. Larry is somebody I recently met at a Tony Caruso event, and I'm here to tell you he freaking rocks, and you're going to see why here in just a minute. So do me a favor. I want you to share this out. Please share this out so we can get a bunch of people on here to hear about Larry's life story and probably even learn a thing or two from this guy. He's pretty smart. So stay with us, share it out. See you in a minute. And we are back. Let me bring the one and only Larry Roberts to the show. Larry, welcome.
What's happening?
Dude, it's so good to have you here.
Yeah, super cool to be here, man. We had a great time, a week and a half ago or so?
Yeah.
Gig, and it was great getting to know you there, and man, it's just awesome to be here.
Likewise, man. It was nice getting to know you as well. I'll be honest, I know you're a professional podcaster yourself, and I was so worried that I wasn't going to do this right. I didn't sleep last night. So I'm
No pressure,
kidding.
man. No pressure. No pressure.
I slept like a baby.
I'm sure you did.
So no, hey, so I started this about 5.5 years ago, and I've interviewed a lot of people, 500 and whatever. It's been unbelievable. And I'm just being completely transparent. The reason I started the show is I was stuck in life. And I'm like, you know what? If I just interview people and hear how they got through the crap, I'll figure it out. And I have. So I can't wait to hear your story. Let's start with you telling everybody where you were born and raised.
Man, we'll start it off. I was born in North Texas in a little town called Denison, which is right on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. It's actually the crossover point there. So if there was a long time where Denison and Sherman, which is the neighboring city just south of Denison, were dry. So everybody would come through Denison, jump over the Denison Dam, which connects Texas to Oklahoma, and they'd go over there and buy their booze and buy their cigarettes on the Indian reservation that was over there. So
Wow. So you spent a lot of time in Oklahoma.
I wouldn't say I spent a lot of time, but going up to Oklahoma was a very common practice. There is a massive lake that's up there called Lake Texoma, which was very creative because it's shared between Texas and Oklahoma. So they called it Lake Texoma. And it's one of, if not the largest man-made lake in the country. It's one of the bigger ones. It might be one or two, but it was massive at one time. And the Denison Dam is a major dam here in the U.S. It separates the Lake Texoma from the Red River, and if you're familiar with the South, the Red River runs all the way through literally everything. So I mean that was where I grew up, and I grew up on the lake, hanging out at the lake all the time, and out there on the boats and on the islands, and getting in trouble and having all kinds of fun.
I always like to, kind of ask, like, I feel like as kids, there's always a person, a place, an event, something that kind of pushes us in the direction that we end up going as adults. What comes to mind when I ask that? Like, what do you think pushed you in the direction you went in life?
Oh, it's pretty simple for me because I was actually born with a birth defect. And I don't know if that's the PC term that we're allowed to use these days. But
it's your birth defect. Call it what you want.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you. It doesn't offend me, so it's all good.
I'm not offended.
But I was born with an inverted sternum. meaning that my sternum, instead of being convex, was concave, and it was growing in while
Oh,
everything else was growing out. And at 4 years
wow.
old, I had to have a surgery that literally saved my life and allowed me to even be here with you today. But at the same time, it also positioned me as a very frail individual. So I was super protected all my life, super sheltered all my life. I was also not wealthy, so I lived a very interesting life in the fact that I went to private school my entire middle, grade school, high school career. But at the same time, I grew up in a trailer park up in North Texas. So I was very
Wow.
poor, but at the same time went to a private school. So that made for an interesting dichotomy as well. And uh, trying to not be as frail as I was. Being karate and martial arts and fighting was always something that was. I just knew if I could get a black belt, I would solve all my problems.
Right.
And eventually I did. There was a point back in the '90s where I owned my own karate school and I fought and did fairly well as a kickboxer and didn't do quite as well as a MMA fighter, but we still had a good time. And I mean, that's really what shaped me was having that birth defect and
Yeah.
being positioned as frail really triggered something in me to not be frail as I grew older. And I didn't want to be seen as the frail guy or as something less than. And that was really my motivating factor. I mean, literally all the way from since I was single digits up into where I'm at today.
I think it's interesting that some of the most successful people I've met in my life are people who are almost like it's almost like they're living to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Whoever them is. And it sounds like that you fall into that. Like you were like, no, I'm not gonna be that guy.
Yeah,
Not that guy.
100%. I mean, I grew
Yeah.
up, I mean, I was 6'3". When I graduated high school, I was 6'3" and 155 pounds. So
Wow.
picture that beanpole, right?
Wow.
And I was not going to let that define me. And that's why even back then I thought, man, if I was just a tough guy, if I could just whoop everybody, this
Right.
I'd be a man and I'd be successful.
Yeah.
and, and
Right.
and honestly, if I hadn't gone through all of those years, decades of martial arts, it would not have shaped me into who I am today. So it really, really cool. Oh, what's up? Brian Galki is in the
We
house.
we we don't need the peanut gallery making rude comments, Brian. Don't make us read your face.
Yeah, thankfully it's a still picture. We can't really read much there. It's only a profile. So yeah.
Right. Right. So you wow, that's great. So you went to obviously you went to high school in Sherman. Is that where you went to high school or
Yeah, I went to
or-
I was in Sherman,
yeah.
yes, but it was a private school, and the name of the school was Glad Tidings. So
Okay.
it was a small private school. Literally, my graduating class was five. Five,
What?
five people were in my graduating class, and I was in the top
Wow.
three.
You had a 20% shot. You
No,
said
it
I
sucks
was in
'cause
the top
it
3.
sucks 'cause I was supposed to be salutatorian. I was supposed to come up in second place, and there was this
Oh
young
my
lady
god.
who's still a great friend of mine today, Nikki Truesdale, was her maiden name, and she showed up our senior year, and she was the homeschool chick. And I
Wow.
literally the first day of senior year, I walk into English class, which was our first class of the day, and I asked my English teacher, I go, "All right, so where's this homeschool chick?" And she was sitting right there. So it was a little bit my mouth got me in trouble a lot back then, but Nikki and I are still great friends to this day.
Dude, it's so cool though that you can say I graduated in as one of the top 3 in my
Oh,
graduating class in high
yeah,
school.
it's all perspective, man. It's all perspective.
Oh, that's freaking awesome. So after high school, did you go to college?
No, no, I think I did go to college eventually when I was about 27. I was
Okay.
dating a young lady, and she thought that college was the answer to all of our problems. And so I went and enrolled at Grayson County College, which is that's Harvard on the hill, Princeton by the pond, a little community college up there in North Texas. And
Right.
I made it through one semester. And so, and even in that semester, I took 4 classes and I dropped 2 of them. So, so, so
My god.
I picked up a whopping 6 credit hours to my name, and that's what I have today. So, yeah, I was,
Wow.
I was actually enrolled at the Art Institute of Dallas, and I was going to go to the Art Institute of Dallas back then. But my significant other at the time, my girlfriend, she came up with child, so that kind of changed the trajectory of things. And instead of going to school, I ended up coming right out of high school and going into selling cars. So
Okay.
I sold cars for about 4.5, 5 years, right
How
out of high.
how'd you do with that?
Dude, I crushed. I mean, and I mean, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I did extremely well. I thought I had it here on my desk, but it's at my other desk. I actually still have my first Mont Blanc, which, if you're familiar with ink pens, a
Of
Mont Blanc
course.
is a higher end pen, and they used to give those away to salesmen of the month. And I have a
Wow.
collection of Mont Blancs, thanks to
No.
thanks to my car sales days.
Wow. It's been a long time since I've had a Mont Blanc. I've had multiple. I need one. I know where to find one now.
There you
So
go. I got plenty.
so yeah. So that's amazing, dude. So okay, so you did that. Why did you get out of that? I have one of my best friends in the world is the number one car salesman in the world, Frank Crenity,
Okay.
and up in Philly. But he makes millions of dollars a year. What made you get out of car sales?
Well, I chased this pipe dream. At the time, what was I, maybe 24?
Yeah.
And I still had these delusions of fighting grandeur. And I wanted to be a pro fighter. That was my thing, man, is I wanted to
UFC?
well, UFC was the goal. And I have several teammates of mine that made it to the big show.
Wow.
But regrettably, it became very apparent that I was never going to make it to the big show. I did well, extremely well on the regional circuit.
Yeah.
And I still remember I was going to Louisiana for a big fight. And we stopped off in Houston. And in Houston was the gym of a gentleman by the name of Saul Solis, who in the late 90s, he was the best trainer literally in the world. Trained Tito Ortiz and Rico Rodriguez and all the UFC champs in the late 90s.
Wow.
And I stopped off in that gym just the night before the next fight en route to Houma, Louisiana, where we were fighting. And we decided to train. So I'm rolling, doing jujitsu with a UFC fighter by the name of Eve Edwards at the time. He was the uncrowned lightweight champion back then. And we were only on the ground for, I don't know, 60, 90 seconds. And already I'm feeling a little winded. And Saul Solis walked by and he said 7 words that literally changed my life. And they're stupid words, but this is what he said. He goes, "Your cardio is a bit suspect, bro." And that sounds innocent. It sounds innocent enough, like, hey, you didn't train hard enough for this. But I knew in my mind that I trained my backside off for this fight that was coming up. I mean, I had trainers for everything: cardio,
Right.
weightlifting, dietitians. I had everybody specific for each need that I had. So I knew I
Yeah.
was at the peak of my physical ability. Well, I mentioned the birth defect earlier, and part of that birth defect, even though my chest was corrected, my lungs were deformed, and they still are, obviously, to this day.
Wow.
So what I ended up finding out was that I only have about 60% of the average person's lung capacity.
Wow.
So no matter how hard I trained, no matter what I did, once I started competing against athletes that also knew how to fight, I was toast. And I physically could not do that. So that fight, or the lead up to that fight, literally changed my life. And after that fight, I never competed again because I realized that I was never going to make it to the big show.
I mean, but or you just shorten the window like Mike Tyson did, right? Why not just a good throat punch and be done?
Hey, man,
I'm-
I'm not going to lie. I was solid in the first round to 2 rounds, but if
yeah.
you get me in, you get me past the second round, and I was in deep waters and I was in trouble. I mean, that's just a fact.
Wow.
And
That's
people started
crazy.
picking up on that too. So it just
Wow.
became apparent that physically I wasn't going to be able to fulfill that particular dream that I had. So I had to change gears.
Wow. That's crazy cool, dude. That you well, I don't remember his name, but the guy walked by and said that Bob Donnell just put it up there
Yeah, yeah.
that, he knew what. So did you go on to Louisiana though and fight?
I went on to Louisiana, and
Yeah.
while years ago I used to lie about it, I went back home after Louisiana and said, "Oh yeah, I won the fight. I won the fight." But no, when he said those words to me, I mentally collapsed. In all honesty,
Yeah.
and I got sick. So I got to the venue and I pulled out of the fight. But I wasn't too sick to corner my teammates. His name was Pete Spratt, and Pete Spratt went on to fight in the UFC. He was one of the first people to beat Robbie Lawler, who Robbie was a monster. He's in the UFC Hall of Fame, and Pete was one of the first guys to ever beat him. But I wasn't sick enough to not corner Pete, but I was too sick to fight myself. So yeah, it was that was probably one of the biggest hurdles that I ever had to overcome, and it was early in life, but at the same time, it was massive for me because that was my pipe dream. I mean, I wanted to go to the show.
Well, sounds like God had a different plan for you, man.
Apparently.
Okay, so that, I think everybody on here watching or listening on the podcast networks, we can all relate to, having a dream crushed right before our very eyes. And I would imagine that you had to have gone through some sort of period of disbelief, depression, anything like that occur for you that you were like,
All
crap,
the above.
man.
All the above. All
Yeah.
the above. I started partying my backside off.
Yeah.
I lived there used to be this it's a chain called Fox and the Hound. And long about 2000, 2001, because that happened, I believe it was 99 when that took place. And then long about 2000, 2001, I started putting myself into my professional career. And we lived at Fox and the Hound every night. I used to just close the place down. I mean, we were regulars. It was like Cheers. Everybody at Fox and the Hound in Louisville, Texas knew my knew my name. And
Wow.
I spent years and years partying. It got a little crazy, and by a little crazy, I mean a lot of crazy.
Right.
Over the next 10 years, became essentially an alcoholic, and ended up in rehab for alcohol in 2013, November of 2013. I went to a facility called InterHealth, which is here in Dallas. They have their offices in Dallas proper, and they have what they call the Ranch, which is up near Van Alstyne here in North Texas. And the Ranch is actually the rehab facility. So ended up going out there for alcohol treatment, was there for about 7 weeks. And it literally saved my life. I mean, before I actually went into the facility, I can vaguely, I vaguely remember being out of work for weeks on end. And thankfully, the company that I worked for, they stuck with me through this whole ridiculous ordeal. They were amazing.
Wow.
I can remember sitting on the couch, and I pretty much resolved myself to the fact that we're a done deal. We're just gonna call it. It's been a good run, but we're out. But I'll tell you, when you're literally on the verge of shutting off the lights, and I'm using that terminology lightly, something speaks to you and goes, "Hey, maybe this isn't really what we're here for." So it was November 14th of 2013, and I heard that voice. It sounds so cheesy, but I was sitting there on the end of my couch in the living room in this same house that I'm in right now. Not the same couch. We have changed couches. But but I was sitting on the couch, and I heard that. It was either you get help today or tomorrow's not going to happen. It was that clear, dude. It sounds so cheesy. And I've always looked at people and went, yeah, sure, whatever. But I'm telling you, I lived it. I had that clarifying moment that said, call somebody or tomorrow's not happening. So I reached out to my best good pal, Kenny, and I called him. I said, hey, bro, I'm done and I need help or tomorrow's not happening. And before you knew it, he swept in, and he happened, the company that I worked for, our vice president of IT, because I was in the IT department, happened to live next door to the son of one of the co-owners of InterHealth. So we reached out, made a phone call. Next thing you know, boom, they're here. My wife and Kenny are here to swoop me up and take me off. And then I got to rehab, and they were like, holy shnikes, this cat is gone. They had to call the ambulance because they couldn't stabilize me. So I ended up in an ambulance. I'm the new guy at the rehab facility, and I'm also the guy going out on a gurney. And spent about 4.5 days in the hospital in McKinney, Texas. And then they came and they took me back to the ranch, and I hung out there for 7 weeks. So
wow,
yeah,
dude. Wow. So I'm assuming you're still in recovery or what, however.
It's interesting, and I didn't even really know we were going down this path, so it's kind of interesting that we're having this.
Well, here we are. And by the way, just so you're not uncomfortable, I don't know if you know this, but I'm coming up on 22 years sober.
Congratulations, sir, because I didn't make it that far. I hung out for 10, 12 years, and then I started playing around again, started dabbling again, this and that. And while it hasn't gotten out of control and now I'm sober again, I definitely have my moments where, I'm sure you talk to a ton of entrepreneurs on your show.
Yep.
And I officially, quote unquote, became an entrepreneur on January 4th of 2021, where I left my corporate career, the same company that stuck with me through all my nonsense.
Yeah.
I was with them for 21 years, and I stepped away to become a full-time entrepreneur after that. And entrepreneurship is an interesting journey because I've always had side hustles. Even when I was still full-time employed, I mean, I started a pool business and grew it to the point where I either had to jump ship and do the pool business full-time or sell it, and I ended up selling it. Always had side hustles like eBay and you name it, man. I've done it all.
Yeah.
But this time with podcasting, I said, man, this is the real deal. And I found some significant success in podcasting.
Yeah.
So I said, this is it, man. I'm done. And at the same time, and there's a reel that's out there right now, if you follow me on social media, where I tell people that I ruined my professional brand. And I did. So if you think back, I went into rehab in 2013.
Yeah.
I didn't leave corporate till 2021. So I was there 8 years after I went into rehab. But guess what? They were cool. They kept me employed. They were amazing. They supported me the whole way. But my corporate career is dead. I'm never going to change positions. I was a business intelligence analyst, so I had a high level position with a great 6-figure salary. I mean, it was a quote unquote great position.
Yeah.
But at the same time, business intelligence, which is essentially AI for data, right, for business, was evolving very, very rapidly. And I saw these young pups coming in, and they had like computer science degrees, they had programming degrees, and they were running circles around the red hat guy. And I wasn't even the red hat guy at the time, but they were running circles around me. And I knew that, wow, I'm stuck here. Either I have to do something or I'm going to become obsolete. So that was part of the influence of me jumping out and going into full-time entrepreneurship.
Wow.
And when you're an entrepreneur, as I mentioned before, it's a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster. Some days you're crushing it. Some days you're being crushed. And a couple of times, maybe getting crushed got to me a little bit. And I I lived in a dry city, which makes sobriety super, super easy.
Right.
But then they changed the laws. Started seeing liquor stores popping up.
Right.
Down the street, a couple blocks away, a mile away. This and that. I didn't have to go out of my way to stop by. And I got tempted, and I fell prey to it and jumped back in. So
you know what though, man? I mean, I think you're significantly younger than I am. I don't know, but
no, I'm 51, man. I'll be 52.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be 56 in July, but I think that for me, I at 34 years old, trust me, I had been a full-blown raging alcoholic since I was about 12. So I get it, man. I went in and out of the program for many, many years. Court ordered at 12 years old to go to AA meetings. So
wow.
I had a long stretch of in and out, man. And at 34, I just said, I'm gonna die if I keep going, and something very similar happened. So I get it, man. It's part of the deal. It's just part of the deal. And congratulations on today.
I appreciate
quite frankly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. It's all that matters. So
it's one day at a time for anybody out there that's listening right now that's struggling. Honestly,
it is.
It's okay. It's one step at a time. Now, I said it's okay. It's not necessarily okay. We don't want to do it. We don't strive to do it. But it happens. So
it happens.
Work through it.
Yeah, you got. I had a guy tell me, a sponsor of mine, say, put the blanking ball bat down. Quit beating yourself up.
There you go.
And I was like, right on. I gotta do that. So, but talk about the so I know you got into, I don't know when you got into podcasting.
Oh,
I know it's been a while. But talk about the journey into podcasting, and I have no idea what the red hat's all about. Although it looks cool. Um I don't know anything about that story, and I feel like I should know that, and I don't know it. And I'm going to give you full screen to tell this, but talk about how you journeyed into the podcasting thing.
yeah, man, it's a fun journey too. So I came out of rehab and was kind of lost. I'm sober. I'm seeing the world clearly for the first time, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with myself. And a
Right.
buddy that I worked with, he was real hardcore on Joe Rogan, and he's like, you got to listen to this Joe Rogan podcast thing. And I'm like, bro, I don't have time for podcasts. That's for nerds. I'm not listening to this nonsense. But eventually he wore me down because as a fight fan, and Joe Rogan, he hosts the UFC, or he does play-by-play for the UFC.
Yep.
I thought, okay, cool. I'll listen to his show. And I listened to his podcast. It was, I mean, just weeks after getting home from rehab. So early 2014, probably around April or so. And he had Tony Hinchcliffe and Joey Diaz on an episode of the podcast. If you don't know who they are, Tony Hinchcliffe literally just killed at the Tom Brady roast just this past weekend.
Yeah.
But he also hosts a show called Kill Tony, which is a comedy podcast. And Joey Diaz, oh my God, he had his own podcast as well. He's an amazing comedian that reminded me of the comedians of the 80s. I grew up on Sam Kinison and Dice Clay and Robin
Yeah.
Williams. All these
Yeah.
cats are just hardcore, right? Very,
all the
very,
all the
very
really religious, spiritually
yes.
evolved.
All the spiritually enriching, yes, just the uplifting, the cream of the crop.
Yes,
And,
right.
so on this episode, man, Joey Diaz and Tony Hinchcliffe, they were just in rare form, and they were telling these types of jokes that I grew up on. I was like, oh my God, I can say this on a podcast and not end up in HR. Because at the time I may have had a mouth on me, and I probably still have a little bit of a mouth on me, and I love a good locker room joke, right?
Right.
So I saw this as an opportunity for me to do comedy. I'm like, oh my God. So I launched my first podcast. I got with an open micer here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Name is James Gravitt. He's still crushing it on the comedy scene. Or Jamie Gravitt, not James. Sorry, James is his dad, Kenny. But anyways, confusing. But I got Jamie. I said, hey man, I want to start this podcast thing. Are you in? He's like, yeah, sure. So we went out and we bought a mic, a singular, and it was a blue snowball. And if you're not familiar with microphones,
oh gosh, yeah,
it's literally a ball about the size of a softball, and it's white. That's why they call it a snowball. And we had no idea what we were doing, but we recorded this podcast by cupping this microphone in our hands, and we'd whisper or say whatever we had to say, and then we gently pass it to the other person, and they would say what they had to say. And we did this for like an hour and a half, dude.
Oh my God.
We were so raw and so raunchy and so just literally disgusting. When we listened back, we were like, we can't release this, dude. We can't put this out to the public.
Right.
So we didn't. But we did end up starting a podcast, and the podcast itself was a comedy podcast. It had a bit of an innuendo in the name. You mind if I say the name? I don't want to get you canceled.
Say the name. I don't care.
It's the name of the show was Accidentally the Whole Tip. So I'll let that sit for a second. And
we're talking about tipping your server, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't mean to tip $20, but I did.
Right. Right.
So anyways, the show crushed, dude. It literally, even to this day, was still my most successful podcast ever. And this was back in 2014, 2015. We ended up taking the show to a live stage show here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Wow.
We went to a club here. It evolved and it turned into an open mic. And it was one of the largest open mics for years and years here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, outside of the comedy clubs. So like the comedy clubs, they had bigger mics, but ours was, people would come from Fort Worth to Louisville, Texas to come to our mics. Wow. And it just crushed for years. And eventually the place where the bar where we had the show, it closed down, and that's what killed the mic. But that's how I got into podcasting. However, as I mentioned, the name, it's a bit of an innuendo.
Yeah.
And I was still in corporate, and I had several fans in the office that was wearing my merch to work. So, so you've got hoodies and T-shirts and sweatshirts that are being worn to the office with this logo and this slogan on the
Oh
shirts.
God.
Well, eventually, I got the knock on the door, and they said, "Hey, let's go down to HR and have a chat." So,
Wow.
they basically gave me they were like, "It's either the show or you. You know, where are you at?"
What?
Yeah, it was kill the show or you got to go. And
Oh my God.
at the time, I wasn't prepared to leave. I wasn't prepared to, in
Yeah,
no way,
right.
was I prepared to leave corporate at the time. So
Right, right.
I had to walk away from the show. But
Wow.
I knew podcasting was still cool. I knew I still wanted to do podcasting,
Yeah.
but I didn't know exactly. I had no real insight into the industry, or even that it was an industry at the time.
Right.
I'd heard of these podcast conferences that are out there, but I'm like, I ain't got time for a conference. That's for nerds. I'm just going to do my thing. But little did I know there was an industry behind it.
Yeah.
So I started another podcast, and this one was going to be PG, super clean. And again, had no idea what to call it or how to work podcasting or anything. And I called this show Readily Random.
Readily random.
Yeah, you can't even hardly say it. I
I
know.
swear I thought you were going to say something about Q-tips or something.
No, it was that random where it would have fit.
It was that random. That's
But
funny,
my goal
dude.
at the time, man, was just to talk to people. I wanted to talk to other people. I wanted to talk to people from all walks of life. Of course, I had Joe Rogan delusions of grandeur. And if you look at the way Joe Rogan does his podcast and you try to emulate it, you're going to fail. That's not how it
Amen.
works.
Yep.
So I didn't know it at the time. So I made the
Yeah.
same mistake that many podcasters continue to make
Yeah.
today. But at the same time, man, I had so many opportunities to grow that show and talk to people that I never would have had the chance to talk to. I saw
Yep.
Mark Victor Hansen is in your opening video there. I
Yeah.
was able to talk to Mark Victor Hansen. I was able
Yeah.
to talk to Satima Nali. I was able to talk to actors. Mark Victor Hansen hooked me up with the saxophone player from Pink Floyd, which was my favorite group of all time, still is to this day.
Same.
It's just one of those things, man, where podcasting showed me that, wow, there's so much potential here that
Yep.
you wouldn't have if you weren't in this industry. So as I started realizing that, I started getting more and more involved in the industry. I started going to the conferences. My first conference was Podcast Movement. I want to say it was in 2019, maybe 2018. I went to Podcast Movement, started seeing that there was business opportunities here.
Yeah.
And so I had founded my business back in 2017. I was doing online courses, and I called my company Readily Random at the time too, because it was the name of the podcast, and I still didn't know any better. So,
Right.
I continued down that path. And as I was going to these conferences, I realized this is a business. There are really ways to do a podcast. There are ways to leverage a podcast. There are ways to grow a podcast, monetize a podcast, grow an audience, build a community. There are techniques to all of this.
Yep.
And I started getting more involved. And then I started speaking about podcasting, and I started getting on virtual stages. Actually, I think a common friend of ours, Tim Gillette, was one of the
Yeah.
first people to ever put me on a virtual stage and let me do
Yeah.
a presentation.
Yeah.
And I built up from virtual presentations too. And some of the presentations were smaller. Some of the conferences, the virtual conferences, were
Yeah.
small.
Right.
But then they built up to bigger virtual conferences, and then those led to live stages, and those led to bigger live stages. And now I travel across the country. I'm headed to LA here in a week, and I speak all across the country on podcasting and branding and using generative AI to do all that. But that's how it all started.
Yeah.
Once I got into the industry, I realized that Readily Random was really just not a name for a podcast at all. So I rebranded the podcast to You're the Boss. And it was an entrepreneur podcast talking to entrepreneurs that are the boss, and was
Yeah.
telling people how they could do the exact same thing and grow from there. Eventually, though, and I think we talked about this at Tony's gig last week, was that I had people coming on the show that were just pitching their book or pitching their product or pitching their service. And I really started feeling like an infomercial.
Yep.
And I killed it. I killed You're the Boss. It's still out there, and there's some great content out there on Apple Podcast or Spotify or anywhere. You're the Boss is still readily available. But I haven't done that show in about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. But I continue to speak on podcasting, continue to be in the industry. I changed the name of my business to Red Hat Media, and things just exploded from there. And we can get into the Red Hat story here in a bit.
Yeah. So you don't currently have a podcast you're doing, is that Is that right?
I actually do have a podcast that I'm doing right now.
Okay.
You met Sarah Losi. She's my business
Oh,
partner.
yeah. That's right.
So
Yes.
I own 2 brands. I have Red Hat Media, and then I
Yeah.
own another I'm partial owner of another company called Branded. And it's literally all about personal, professional branding,
Yep.
and content creation and leveraging content for your branding. So Sarah and I have a podcast together that's
Got
called
it. Yeah.
Branded.
Yeah.
And then within what are we where I don't know what the date is, but here in about 2 weeks, I have a brand new solo show that I'm launching called AI Proof, which is going to be all about how we AI proof our industries, how we AI proof our careers, how we AI proof our children. Basically, just how are we preparing ourselves for this AI revolution that we're going through. So that's where I'm at today.
That's awesome, dude. I think that, I have obviously this podcast. Then Glenn and I do the Ken and Glenn show, which
Huh?
we've never taken serious as a podcast, but it's out there. But I think that, look, he says, wow, I joined to harass you both, and I'm blown away at how good this episode is.
That's
It's
awesome.
probably even better than the one when you were on, Brian.
Man, I don't want to get into a competition here, but hopefully I delivered as much value on Brian's podcast as I'm trying to deliver here. I don't want Brian to feel shortchanged. So
Yeah, well, Brian was on this podcast as well. So, but I think that and you heard me talk, I heard you talk. So many people are, and I do want to hear the story about the red hat before
yeah,
we
man.
wrap up today. But I want to talk a little bit about. I've been in marketing and branding and technology for 30 years, and I look at people that come to me and they're like, well, and probably to you, and I need help with branding, or I want to sell more books, or I want to sell more widgets, I wanted whatever. And like Grant Cardone, who's a mentor of mine and a friend, says, money follows attention. And
Yep.
if you're not like there, in my opinion, there's only a couple of ways to get massive attention, and that's go out and knock on doors. And I've done that and it sucks.
I have to.
Or go out and make cold calls all day long, or learn how to build your brand and explode it in the digital revolution that we're in social media.
Yeah.
Everybody, not everybody, but most people should have some form of a podcast. Do you agree or disagree with that?
100%. And I wouldn't be in business if I didn't agree with that. Because I mean, that's primarily the foundation of our business is
Right.
helping brands launch podcasts. We don't do a whole lot of launching individual podcasts. I mean, if somebody wants to start a podcast about their favorite hobby, more than happy to help, point them in the right direction. I've actually got and here I'm gonna drop this real quick. Have a little podcast, do it yourself launch workbook that Sarah and I put together. So if for hobbyists, this is kind of the route we go.
Yeah.
But the foundation of both of my businesses really is using content and using podcasts to grow your brand.
Yep. If you're not, like, why wouldn't you? I just like, why wouldn't you start a podcast and just get on and talk to people? It's crazy how many people don't do it. It's nuts. And I know people who, sorry, go ahead. What?
I was gonna say it could be scary. People are scared of this little camera thing that's in front of me here. They're scared of this, although it's off screen because I like mine being off screen. They're scared of this microphone thing. That's so there you go. They're scared of the microphone thing.
Right.
It's intimidating. They haven't done it before, and
I know.
there was definitely a time where I got on here and I was, hello everybody. I'm Larry, and this is 10 minutes in, and I'm just trying to get 10 minutes in on live feed today. So that's what I'm gonna do. We've all been there, bro.
Right, dude. That is so funny. I think, here's the other thing. I know people who, because if you wouldn't have said, yeah, I've got a podcast right now, I'd have been like, hey, man, thanks for stopping by. Like, what the hell are you talking? You can't be a podcast expert if you don't have a podcast.
Agreed.
But I know, and I see this with, and I have an academy where I teach live streaming and social media branding and podcasting. But I think, like, what about the people who used to have a podcast? They experienced massive, I mean, it's impossible to do a podcast unless you're a complete idiot. Like, it's impossible to do a podcast and not get attention for whatever it is you do in life. Like, for money, right?
Sure.
Like
Sure.
there are people that don't, but they fall into that other category. But the people who used to have a podcast killed it, got all kinds of business, stopped doing the podcast, and haven't restarted doing their podcast when they could do it today, like right
Yeah.
now, start
Yeah.
today, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Why do people do that, do you think?
Man, it's imposter syndrome. 1000%. I have zero doubt that it's anything other. I was definitely scared. Ken had to push me. Good job, Zena. I assume it's Zena. Hopefully, I'm saying that right.
Zena's freaking awesome,
Yeah,
man.
that's amazing. So good job. I love the little emoji there because that emoji really personifies what most people feel, man. It is scary. It's scary to watch yourself back. And look, I'll full disclosure. I just bought these teeth last year. Okay, I just got they're all veneers, and I had a
they're
horrible.
gorgeous.
Thank you. They should be for what I spent on them.
I
But but I look back, man, to 18 months ago, 24 months ago when I didn't have these, and I had my little chiclets that were still in there, and it's devastating to look back and see myself in a way that I didn't want to see myself even then. So super intimidating, super scary to put yourself out there and know, and at a time too, I got up to 326 pounds. I was massive. I'm about 250 now, so I'm still a big guy, but I was huge. I mean, insanely huge. I walked with a cane. I did a lot of damage with the alcohol. So when I came out of rehab, I was on pain medication and stuff for years and years and years. Literally couldn't move. I did a ton of damage. But anyways, so I ballooned up to 326. So I look back and I was still doing podcasts even then at 326 pounds with my little chiclets. I look back and I see myself and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I put myself out there. But guess what? Even though I look like poop, and I'm not happy with the way I presented myself. I have what at the time I consider a fairly cheesy background compared to what I have now. I look back with regrets, but guess what? That's part of the process. That's part of the journey.
Part of the deal.
And we have to start somewhere. And actually, if you flip the script, it's rewarding to be able to look back and go, wow, I was there. And look where I'm at now. That's the reward, man. And that's what people don't get. They don't get the reward. They get the pain of starting and they get the fear of starting, but they don't understand until they live it, until they do it, until they experience it. They don't understand the reward of going through the journey.
I look back, I had a show on Grant Cardone TV, dude. And I had this, I had these guys, these people working for me that were supposed to create this studio for me. And I'm interviewing Grant on his network, and I'm looking down at the laptop because that's where he is. The camera's clear over here in my studio, and I got this dinky ass little TV on the wall behind me, and I'm like, this is the dumbest thing. Like, I look at it now and I think this is really stupid. What in the heck? But that's the part that people don't get is Joe Rogan's first podcast was horrible. I haven't even heard it or seen it.
Dude, he was on a couch. He was literally sitting on a couch. There was 3 or 4 people in the room, in a living room, on a couch. They were all high as kites, and they're doing this podcast thing. I mean, it's the worst thing ever. But that's where he started.
You got, but so the key is what you said. You just got to start.
Yeah,
you just got to start, man. Like, and hell, Larry's got a workbook you can go get. I don't even have that. You gave me an idea though, so thanks. I'm going to yell at my wife. Huh?
I'll expect royalties.
Yeah, right.
I need affiliate. I need an affiliate.
Right. Right. I love that. So, and I see Brian Galkey is, you know what? Honestly, I see him growing and doing live streams and doing the stuff out there, man.
See, I've never seen Brian not perfect. I've never seen Brian not just crush. Since I met him, he's been crushing since I've known him. I've only known him a short time, probably months, but he's been awesome ever since I've known him.
He's amazing. He is amazing. Yeah. So tell me where the red hat thing came in.
Yeah, man. All we talk about is branding and personal branding and standing out in a crowd and setting yourself apart. And actually, the hat that started it all is right behind me here. It's in a hat box now, in a little shadow box right behind me. It is a red Supreme hat. Supreme is a lifestyle brand that a lot of the wacky kids are wearing these days. And even though I'm 51, I refuse to believe that. And it was just a few years ago. I was speaking at an event at the Emily Arena in Tampa, Florida, and I was wearing that exact hat. And there's a gentleman by the name of Alex Sanfilippo. And if you're in the podcast space, you may know Alex. He owns a company called Podmatch. And I'm the number one Alex Sanfilippo fan. Podmatch is great for guesting and hosting podcasts. So if you want to get on podcasts, that's where you go. And Alex is a great friend of mine. And we love to give each other a hard time every time we speak. And we typically speak at the same events. So I did my talk. I came down. He goes, great talk, blah, blah, blah. Gave me a lot of grief, just for fun. He goes, but I got to ask you, why are you wearing that Supreme hat? And I said, well, I'm just trying to be cool, bro. I'm trying to relate to the audience as a younger audience. He goes, that's cool and all, but are they paying you? And I went, no. I go, dude, I'm a middle-aged white dude. They'd pay me not to wear their stuff, in all honesty. Let's just break it down. He goes, then why are you giving them a stage? He goes, but at the same time, I love the red. Because as I mentioned before, I'm 6'3", about 250 right now, 245-ish. If I'm gonna say 245 just to save a few pounds. But I'm a big guy and I already kind of stand out and I'm loud. He goes, but that red hat on your head, it's like a beacon. He goes, I can see you down the hallway of the hotel. I can see you all the way across the arena because you got that hat on your head. And so that really resonated with me. And after that event, I went home and I tossed that Supreme hat in the closet. And I went on Amazon and I bought a $6 unbranded red flat bill hat. Tilted it about 5-10 degrees to the right, which is how I like to wear all my hats. And dude, it was like a life-changing event. Within literally months, I became known as the red hat guy in the podcast space.
Wow.
People didn't know my name, but they became familiar with the red hat guy. They knew that the red hat guy knew podcasting. And I'll tell you where it really got driven home was, I believe that talk was in November, and I believe it was March of the next year. So 5-6 months later, I went to Bitcoin Miami, which is a massive conference. 30,000+ people are in attendance there. And I was there as a content creator, interviewing some of the speakers and some of the other content creators that were there. Yeah. And over the course of those 3 days that I was there, multiple people that I did not know in a sea of 30,000 people came up to me and went, oh, you're the podcast guy. And I go, how'd you know that? And they go, oh, the hat. We saw the hat. We knew it was you. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane. This is so real. This is so powerful that I went back, I changed my business name. And from that point forward, I was the red hat guy. And now everything is red hat. So that's where it came from. Super impactful and a major lesson for anybody that's out there. You don't necessarily have to wear a hat, but as Sharon, I'm sorry, is saying right there, you got to have branding. You got to stand out. You got to be different. You got to be noticeable. And the red hat is what does it for me.
The balding head is what does it for me.
Well, that may be why we never take the hat off either. So,
right. That's hilarious. So, I like to, I mean, look, you've been through it in life. You've been certainly had, I mean, my gosh, the starting at 4 years old, the challenges and well, starting at birth.
Yeah, starting at birth, 4 years old, we fixed that first one,
Yeah. But you've been through all the ups and downs, and I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, quite honestly. That definitely my entire adult life, and it can be a serious roller coaster when it comes to eating or paying your bills, or all of that. It can be there can be cash flow issues, there can be all kinds of challenges. So what would you say to everybody listening or watching, if you had all 8 billion people listening to you from planet Earth all at one time right now, what would you say to them to encourage them to keep going one more day, keep going, take one more step?
Wow, that's a powerful question, and one that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, to be honest with you. But in all honesty, tomorrow's a totally different day, man. It could be as dark as anything you've ever not seen, because in the dark might have a hard time seeing. But tomorrow's a different day. And if you can persevere, and if there's one thing that all of my martial arts and all my karate days and all of that taught me was really perseverance, was fighting through and having a strong mental fortitude. And looking back, and here we go, it just hit. Personal responsibility is absolutely the key.
Mm.
You have to look internally and go, what can I, not can what all my circumstances, but what can I do to move forward in the next minute, in the next
Mm.
hour, in the next day, in the next week, in the next year? What can I, because it's all on me, man. It's all on me. All of my mistakes, they're on me.
Yeah.
All of my success, granted, there's a lot of luck involved, and I would have never made it through going through the rehab or really anything without a strong support system in place as well, with a ton of friends and a ton of family that were lifting me up and pushing me along the way. But
Yeah.
they can push, they can lift, they can shove, they can help all they want. But if you don't make that decision internally to do what you need to do to take that next step, to make that next move, you're sunk. So, personal
It's true.
responsibility. I'm going to go that route.
Okay. So my next question is even more challenging. I'm kidding, it's not. Um, but you're not allowed to say fear because that's what everybody says, and I think
Okay.
you can do better. What do you think? Because I've been, I've been broke and homeless, and I've been wealthy, and wealthy is way better. And it is like money is, I love. So Reverend Ike, through Mark Victor Hansen's a really good friend of mine. Bob Donnell's who introduced him to me. And Mark and I become really good friends, and I'm a referral partner with him and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, he introduced me to Reverend Ike's son Xavier, and Reverend Ike had this saying. He said, it's been said that the love of money is the root of all evil. And he said, I've changed that, and I've made it this: the lack of money is the root of all evil. I mean, you don't see rich people breaking into people's homes and businesses stealing stuff. Like, it just doesn't happen, right? So when I in that context, what do you think stops people from having it all, man? And I'm talking about the money, the freedom, the everything that we all want. We all really want it, but only a tiny percentage of us actually get there. What
Mhm.
do you think is stopping people from having it all? Don't say fear.
I won't say fear, but I'll go back to my other answer. It's personal accountability, personal responsibility. It's the ability to look internally and go, I can do this. And quotable, wealth is way better. No,
It really
I
is.
totally agree.
It really is. It really is.
But I'll still go back to that personal accountability, man. We have to look within ourselves and make the decision to take the next step. We have to make the decision to do what it takes to become wealthy. We have to make that personal decision to start that podcast. We have to make the decision to take the step away from our guaranteed paycheck and take that risk and roll the dice and go, can I do this as an entrepreneur? And in no way am I trying to inspire anyone to leave their very secure paycheck. But at the same time, if you want that freedom and you want to be able to exceed that paycheck,
Yep.
you got to look inside and go, am I willing to do that? So do what you got to do, take that personal responsibility and put yourself on the path to success. And I think too many people resist the urge to do it. And I'm trying not to use the word fear, but they're not taking that accountability. They're not taking that accountability to take the steps necessary to do it. So look within yourself and make it happen.
Dude, and it's okay to use fear in the whole thing, right? But I have people go, that's easy, it's fear. I'm like, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, give a little
So,
insight. Give a little insight.
yeah, and you certainly did. So Joe
I love it.
Ingram's funny. He's hilarious. So Larry, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience before we wrap up? How to find you, follow you, anything, and what's your website address? I'll scroll across the bottom here.
Website is super simple. It's just my name, LarryRoberts.com. Everything about me will be on that page. My business is on there. All of my content is on there. All my links to my social, they're all on LarryRoberts.com. So I'm super easy to find.
There you go. Perfect. I've got it scrolling across the bottom. Anything else you want to share with everyone?
No, man, I appreciate you having me on today. This was a lot of fun. It definitely went directions that I did not anticipate going this morning. So that was pretty interesting. But hopefully somebody in the audience got some value out of my story and some of the conversation that we had over this last hour. So it's been awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. And I really genuinely meant it when I said I was a little bit nervous. I mean, I was a little bit. But thank you for coming on and sharing your story and your experience, strength, and hope as well, man. It's been great. So, look what
The
look.
in behind Larry. Oh, the T-Rex there.
Oh my God, Joe.
They're the same age, right? Joe, is that right? They're about the same age.
Right, exactly. I think Joe's older than me. All right, hey brother, listen, I appreciate you. Hang on, don't hang up on me. But I'm going to end the live stream, and thank you to everyone who's watched and commented and shared. If you've not shared this out yet, you can still redeem yourself and go ahead and click that share button, because people need to hear this. This is real. This was real and very authentic, and that's who Larry is. So, dude, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. All right. See you guys later.